Hi, I'm Bob Kendrick, and this is Storied, 22 stories in 22 weeks about the history of the Negro Leagues. If we're going to look for one single solitary event that helped usher in integration in our sport, it would be World War II. And of course, here you had the sentiment of young black soldiers dying, fighting essentially the same racism in another country that we were being asked to accept here at home. That led to the movement of our so-called national pastime. The sentiment was this: if they could die fighting for their country, they ought to be able to play baseball in this country. That led to Jackie Robinson being handpicked from the great Kansas City Monarchs. Jackie had played here for the Kansas City Monarchs in 1945, and at the end of the 45 season, signed his contract to play in the Brooklyn Dodgers organization. He would spend the 46th season in Montreal in the Dodgers farm system, and then, of course, on April 15, 1947, make that monumental walk on the field as a member of the Brooklyn Dodgers, forever changing the game of baseball, but more importantly, forever changing this country. There's no question. You can divide the American 20th century into two pieces: before Jackie and after Jackie. He had that kind of impact in terms of sparking social progress in our country. But the question that is so commonly posed to me is, was Jackie Robinson the best player in the Negro Leagues? No. He wasn't the best player on his own Kansas City Monarch team. And by no stretch is that to disparage Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson is one of the greatest athletes in American sports history. He was a four-sport letterman at UCLA. Baseball was his weakest sport. He was a much better basketball, football, and track athlete than he was baseball player, which tells you how talented Jackie Robinson was, because he turns himself into a Hall of Fame caliber baseball player. Some say that he was an even better tennis player. There was nothing that Jackie couldn't do. But there were other Negro League veterans who were better baseball players than Jackie was at that time. But Jackie absolutely was the right man to be the first. You see, Jackie had what I refer to as the intangibles that better prepared him to deal with the racial hatred. He had been a celebrated collegian at UCLA, an all-American football player, so he certainly had a little cachet surrounding him. So he is college educated. He had served in the military. He was disciplined. He would become married to the beautiful Rachel Robinson. He's stable. All those attributes would be called upon to deal with that racial hatred. Keep in mind, when Jackie Robinson takes the field with the Brooklyn Dodgers on April 15, 1947, he is called everything but, as my mother would say, but a child of God. You see, when Jackie stepped to the plate, they knocked him down continuously. As a matter of fact, the opposing team pitchers would oftentimes get fined if they didn't knock him down. When he would slide into second base, he would oftentimes come up wet, where the opposition had spit on him. When the opposition slid into second, they came in spikes high, trying to cut him. They did everything imaginable to break Jackie, but Jackie would not break. Some of those other Negro Leaguers who had been so acclimated to segregation, they couldn't have handled it. Yeah, had you thrown a black cat on the field when, say, Willie Wells walked out on the field, his natural instinct would have been pick that black cat up, throw it right back where it came from. But now all the naysayers would have said, see, I told you they couldn't handle it. But if Jackie can't play, the naysayers would have said, see, I told you they weren't good enough to play in this league. So Branch Rickey had a double difficult task of identifying the right guy, because failure was not an option on either side of the equation. If Robinson can't take the abuse, the experiment is over. If Robinson can't play, the experiment is over. It could have been another 10, 15, 20 years or more before another black man would have gotten an opportunity to play in the major leagues. Folks, think about it. If it's 20 years later, think about the great stars we would have missed. We'd have missed Willie Mays. We would have missed Henry Aaron, Ernie Banks. Roy Campanella, Bob Gibson, Roberto Clemente. Can you imagine our sport without those great stars? And if you can imagine what it was like before 1947. Because I can tell you with no level of uncertainty, they didn't learn how to play baseball after 1947. They were playing great baseball well before 1947. And again, had the doors opened sooner, the record books would be entirely different. It just leaves you wondering, what if? Yeah, what if the doors had opened sooner? How much better our game would have been. This has been Bob Kendrick for Storied. 22 amazing stories of the Negro Leagues in 22 amazing weeks. Stay tuned for the next episode next week.